Hello, this is John with WesleyGospel.com. I would like to talk about the subject of the quest for organic divine healings. The quest for organic divine healings. And, this is a subject I haven't really given much thought to because I think that a lot of people don't really give thought to it unless they're personally confronted with the problem in their personal lives. And when I consider cessationists like Justin Peters, and before him there was another woman, Joni Eareckson Tada, who were part of John MacArthur's crowd, the cessationist camp, because they personally had severe paralysis in their bodies and were not able to find any authentic divine healers that could give them authentic organic divine healings. And for this reason they call themselves cessationists. I don't think that first off, in terms of terminology, I don't think a person should call themselves a cessationist simply because they haven't yet found a modern charismatic healing ministry that produces dramatic physical organic divine healings. Continuationism implies the full spectrum of the gifts of the miraculous gifts of the Spirit. And I would say that before we're talking about dramatic organic divine healings, we're talking about prophets and prophetesses receiving visions and dreams from the Holy Spirit before we ever even get to organic divine healings. So when we're talking about continuationism, I think we should talk more in terms of baptisms in the Holy Spirit and hearing the voice of God, the psychological phenomena of the Holy Spirit, and imparting faith that is supernatural, knowledge, ESP type phenomena, revelation. I mean, before we ever even get to think about transforming physical matter by dramatic organic divine healings. So I think that drawing the cessationist conclusion before we've even gotten into the step of tapping into divine revelation through prayer in the Holy Spirit is extreme. It's an extreme position to take, and it's more so fixated on, I have an extreme sickness, so do a miracle. It's like jumping so far ahead of all the steps that you need to do in order to get there. I watched a presentation by Justin Peters just now. It was pretty eye-opening, but at the same time not really that surprising, of just some disgusting dirt that he was able to dig up on Smith Wigglesworth and John G. Lake and different Pentecostal people from the past. I had no idea that John G. Lake and Smith Wigglesworth were such scoundrels. He brought up a thing about Smith Wigglesworth throwing a baby and kicking a baby like a soccer. I mean, like Todd Bentley, like just horrific, complete lack of compassion, totally demonic. And John G. Lake, scamming people into penny stocks and pulling all sorts of scams, going to a seance and underage affairs and stuff like this. So, when new information like that comes out on certain people that were involved in divine healing in the past, you just have to strike them off the list. And I think that studies like this that are done by people like Justin Peters are helpful because they help us to focus on the authentic and keep on scratching off the list through a process of elimination of who to not receive teaching from when it comes to the subject of divine healing. I've yet to see anybody convincingly strike Maria Woodworth-Etter off the list. I've seen him strike Catherine Coleman off the list. I've seen him strike Smith Wigglesworth and John G. Lake off the list. I've seen him strike Aimee Semple McPherson off the list, but I have never seen somebody convincingly and persuasively be able to build a strong case against Maria Woodworth Etter. So I would like to see that done. I've seen some people try to bring up some stuff. I was not convinced. The only thing that they were able to bring up against her is that she went into trances during her meetings. And why shouldn't she, if she's operating in the power of God, right? So I think that Maria Woodworth Etter could still be held out as an example of a person who could teach people on divine healing. Because that's what we really need today. Authentic, real teaching on divine healing prayer. I question some of the things John Wimber did, like some of his looseness with language at times, but I still think that he was authentic in divine healing. David C. Lewis was a social anthropologist who studied him and surveyed people at his meeting. One time, his book was called Healing, Fiction, Fantasy, or Fact by David C. Lewis, Dr. David Lewis. Dr. William Nolan was a physician. He wrote a book called Healing, A Doctor in Search of a Miracle. And Dr. Nolan interviewed psychic healers and also studied Kathryn Kuhlman and was persuaded that Kathryn Kuhlman was a real divine healer. So, you try to make these people through a process of elimination to try to find the purest example to learn from. And you end up with just, maybe 2, maybe 3 names at best. John Wimber, Maria Woodworth Etter, Kathryn Kuhlman. Craig Keener is a academic at Asbury Seminary, and he put out a book called Miracles Today. He had great confidence in Kathryn Kuhlman as well. So I think that whenever you have scientific verification, like where you have doctors like William Nolan healing, A Doctor in Search of a Miracle, or David Lewis, Dr. David Lewis, Healing, Fiction, Fantasy, or Fact, where you have people that are in the sciences studying alongside, you have verification. And honestly, what do you have in the book of Acts? Luke, the doctor, the physician, writing the book of Acts, writing the Gospel of Luke, and attending Paul. Probably one of Luke's main interests in following Paul around was the fact that Paul was doing divine healing. And Luke was there to verify to people, yeah, he really is healing people. Here's my doctor's imprimatur. So I think that if we're going to really look for the real thing and stop just creating a cessationist theory based off of identifying charlatans, the best way to really identify the authentic healers from the past in the books that they've left behind to provide us with teaching and guidance with regard to prayer for divine healing would be to see whether or not there were actual medical doctors verifying what they were doing. If they had medical doctors verifying what they were doing in book format, you might have something scientifically, empirically verifiable there. The same cannot be said of John G. Lake. The same cannot be said of Smith Wigglesworth. The same cannot be said of Aimee Semple McPherson, so far as I know. But I would think that when medical doctors come into the picture at some point in the life of ministry of a healing evangelist, to verify and to put their stamp of approval on it, I would have to say that puts a special element of authenticity upon the life and ministry of the healing evangelist. I would also recommend, for those who are really serious in their pursuit of organic divine healing, to study it, to get the right books, and to pray it up. To get their hands on a book called The New International Dictionary of Pentecostal and Charismatic Movements, revised and expanded edition by Stanley Burgess, because cessationists are going to create a barrage of lists of false divine healing people, and you're going to feel like, well, who's left? You know, you get your hands on a cessationist book, and they're just scratching all these people off the list, and you're thinking to yourself, well, who's left to teach me about divine healing? Now there's no hope for this, right? It's great that people like this can expose and dig up dirt and create a persona that these people are false prophets, but we don't want to lose the teaching on divine healing at the same time that we're doing this. Okay? If you grew up thinking that Smith Wigglesworth was a man of God and he taught people on divine healing, only to find out that he took a 2-month baby and threw it against a wall and kicked it like a ball, or that he got involved in some threesome in South Africa and then repented for it afterwards, or that John G. Lake sat right next to William J. Seymour but was involved in tithing and penny stock scams in his church and dressing up like a mystic Arab and just being a scoundrel and just getting involved in crazy stuff. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, you know, if divine healing exists, who are we supposed to turn to then when all of these teachers have been undermined as a bunch of scoundrels and lowlifes? Well, my answer to that at this point would be to get your hands on the New International Dictionary of Pentecostal and Charismatic Movements, with a special eye towards the divine healing article, and with a special eye towards the bibliographies of the books involved there. And also look at Healing Through the Centuries by Ronald Kidd, with special attention to John Wimber and Catherine Coleman, because I really believe that, you know, with all their imperfections, they could not be rightly called scoundrels in the sense that these guys were. And I do believe that there was even medical science verification in both cases of actual organic physical healings happening, not just the mild pain relief type healings, which people like to label as psychosomatic, which I still believe are from the Holy Spirit and not from adrenaline. But we're talking about the real deal, you know, healing crippled people and getting them out of their wheelchairs and getting rid of cancerous tumors, this type of stuff. And it not being fake, but actually being medically verified at times. I would say that if we're looking for that type of thing, and that's the only thing that would break a cessationist out of their mold, then we have got to start studying this subject alongside medical science. If there is a medical science person involved in the life and ministry of a divine healing evangelist, that requires special attention, and I'll let it rest at that. God bless you out there. This is John with WesleyGospel.com.